Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and today I'll be doing a hypothetical 2020 election scenario between Senator Cory Booker, the Senator of New Jersey, versus President Donald Trump. So, I believe that Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are comparable in a lot of ways, not just in political ideology, but when people think of the 2020 presidential election, at least at this point, they usually think of Cory Booker and Kamala Harris just because they made it very clear without even saying it, that they're going to run in 2020. And I don't think that they're the two best candidates. I think they're the two most likely candidates at this point, just because they're the two that have been making it the most clear this early on. But I don't think that they're going to be the Democratic candidate. I don't think that either of them are, just because of their ideology. As I went over with Kamala Harris, she is a Democratic. She's a hybrid politician who tries to mix progressivism with democratic conservatism, and that is not a combination that works. And I believe that Booker is much of the same. I don't think he's as much a Democratic. I don't think he's as much a Democratic conservative, but I think that he definitely is not a progressive, and he tries to. He's claimed that he is part of the progressive movement. He claims that he is a member of it. He has said, I don't think this is an exact quote, but he has said that you will not find me with the progressive movement. You will find me right in it, or something like that. He's trying to make it seem as though he's a progressive, and he's evidently not. And I think the American people will see that if he is up for election in 2020. With that said, however, I think he will do a bit better than Kamala Harris, and definitely better than Kirsten Gillibrand, the last prediction I made. And this is because I think that he's a much better speaker. I think they'll do much better against Trump in debates. I think he's one of the finest speakers in Congress. If you hear him on the Senate floor, he's very passionate. He's clearly very passionate about what he's doing, and his passion is very clear to see. The stories of him working tirelessly as mayor of Newark, delivering food to people at the who are homeless. He's inspirational. He's an inspirational person, but I don't know if that inspiration will go far enough to make him president of the United States if he's the candidate for the Democratic Party, and I guess we'll see. Alright, so let's start with safe states as always. West Coast, nothing's going to change there. Red states in the Midwest, nothing will change there. I've forgotten in the past few election scenarios to leave the 2nd District blank, and I've just glazed over it. My apologies, that's my mistake. For the sake of the African American vote, I'm going to leave Missouri open just for that. I will discuss the African American factor throughout this video, which I believe is something that must be discussed when you're doing a Cory Booker election scenario. Northeast, nothing will change there. Maine's first, so that'll be safe. Okay, now let's start discussing. Actually, the first state that I'm going to fill in solid is going to be Missouri for the Republicans. And this is because although in 2008 and in 2012, I believe a little bit, Barack Obama did make the state very competitive. In 2008, he almost won it. And this is mostly because of the African-American factor. But I really don't believe that there will be anywhere near the African-American turnout that we saw in 2008 and even 2012 that we'll see with Cory Booker. I believe it'll be a factor. I believe it'll absolutely be a factor when you're running an African-American candidate. But I don't believe they'll be anywhere near the turnout that we saw with Barack Obama. I don't believe that that's achievable at this point for Cory Booker. However, I do believe it'll be a factor, but even at that point, I don't believe that Missouri will become competitive, given that Trump won it by such a large margin in the last election. So for that reason, I would fill Missouri in as solid. Okay, I'm going to stop going from west to east, which is what I usually do. I'm just going to fill in states that I believe are most likely to least likely, and then sort that accordingly. So Virginia, I believe, would be likely, for the reason that it's just a solid Democratic base. It would go Democrat. If it would be likely for Kirsten Gillibrand, it would be likely for Cory Booker. I believe that the only way for Trump to win the state is to really discourage minorities from turning out and to drive out the white working class here by appealing to them, which I don't think he has much appeal to, or not as much appeal to as he used to. And I believe that Cory Booker's African-American appeal will do decently for him in Virginia. New Mexico, that's a likely state, as it would be for any Democrat. He's not Hispanic. If you For any Hispanic candidate, I believe I would give this state solidly in their column, just given the fact that the state is likely to almost any other Democrat, and the fact that driving a Hispanic turnout will make it even more likely, aka solid. So for that reason, since Cory Booker is just African American, this state would be likely. Texas, likely in Trump's column, if not solid. I believe that it'll become a little bit more competitive than in 2016, just based on the shifting demographic and the fact that it was a bit competitive with Hillary Clinton. So for that reason, it'd be likely. That's pretty much the same reason why I'd make it likely red in any Trump versus generic Democrat scenario. Georgia, I'd say likely, just considering the African American factor, which is more of a factor in Georgia than it is Missouri, which I think most people would agree with, just because it did go within the margin of 5% last election between Hillary Clinton and President Trump, and then candidate Trump, and now we have an African American running here, and who knows, it could become more narrow than 5% given the third party vote, which was a big factor in why it became down to 5% in this state, but still, it's not time for it to flip now, and I would consider it to be likely. However, North Carolina would consider lean, and this is a combination of the discouragement of the white working class and the white suburban class. I shouldn't just say white working class, because that's too general. I say that too often. The white suburban class voters, the affluent suburban class that typically does vote Republican, but is now shifting towards the Democrats as a result of the early on tax bill that the Republicans passed, as a result of their discouragement with Trump in general. They're shifting towards the Democrats, and then once you consider Trump's low approval rate in the state, and then you could also consider African American turnout, this state would become a bit more close than it would be in any other scenario, which is lean and not likely, which is what I would typically give it as. Okay. Florida, I'll come back to, obviously. That state's going to be the hardest to call. Colorado, I consider likely, and this is because it's all Democratic based, and I believe that Booker can appeal to voters better than Hillary Clinton could in 2016. African American turnout's also a factor. And I know I didn't really consider African American turnout when it came to Kamala Harris, but like I said, Kamala Harris, like I always take Hillary Clinton as an example. She was a woman, but just because she's a woman doesn't mean you're just going to vote for her because she represents women's rights. And in fact, she got a surprisingly low amount of women voters on her side. She should have gotten much more than that, but she didn't. And I believe that Kamala Harris would be the same way with black voters. I don't believe that she embodies what many African Americans feel about American politics. However, I do believe that Cory Booker does embody it to some degree. I believe that many African Americans will look at him and see someone who can who represents their values. And I mean, that's obviously I'm not African American, so I can't speak from that to experience, but I'm just speaking from what I see in the electorate and what I've seen with President Trump, Barack Obama, and I believe that they're comparable to some degree. I would not compare Booker to Barack Obama in every respect, but I believe that he could pull off the resemblance just enough to do better than Kamala Harris or a candidate like Kirsten Gillibrand would. Arizona, I'll come back to. Nevada, I consider this state a lean in Trump's column, and this is because Trump's approval is higher than 50% in this state. It could be lower. That was just the last poll that was taken in this state individually. I guess we'll see the next time an individual state poll comes out. But I do believe that there is a Trump base here, and I believe that it's possible that one or maybe even two Democratic districts in this state could go Republican in 2018, just based on the Trump shifting demographic. And for that reason, I believe it would go a lean to Trump. And now to the Rust Belt. Pennsylvania to start out with, I believe would lean Booker, and this is because of Trump's low approval in the state in general. And Booker is from New Jersey, and he does have that regionalist appeal to voters in Pennsylvania, more so than any other Democrat who isn't from the region would. And given Trump's low approval, which I already said, and the Democratic shift in the state in general, I could see it going likely. I know this is kind of hypocritical compared to the call that I made for Kamala Harris which I did clarify in the comments that I said it would be lean, not likely, even though I did fill it in as likely in that video. But I do believe that it would go likely to Booker, which is a big call for him to make, and I believe is one of the important reasons why he would be a decent candidate in general, is because of his ability to campaign in Pennsylvania. Alright, now Minnesota I believe would be likely as well. Not much to say about that. I mean, the only way that the state would be solid is if you're Bernie Sanders, who can really drive out grassroots campaigning, or if you're Hispanic and you can drive out the Hispanic community in the state that exists in general. Any other scenario, I believe it would be either lean or likely to Booker, because I believe he is one of the more decent, not great, but decent candidates that Democrats can run in 2020. So for that reason, I make it likely. Same goes with Michigan. I'd say this would be likely, and this is mostly because the African American turnout that would, I believe, give Booker an advantage over Trump, and also because of Trump's low approval in the state in general. Then as for Wisconsin, I believe it'd be lean, and this is because of the African American turnout, which will play a factor, a very slight factor, but a factor regardless. The same reasons I cited for making North Carolina a lean state for Trump and that's because of the slow dissatisfaction of the white affluent suburban class for Donald Trump, which I believe will play a huge factor for Democrats come 2020. And for that reason, I'd make this state a lean. However, Iowa, that's still a likely state. I still don't see that state being filled in as anything but likely Trump, or lean Trump at the most, unless it's Bernie Sanders. And I plan to do another Bernie Sanders prediction soon, because things have changed in the electorate since my last prediction with him. But I do believe that he's the only candidate that can have a chance at winning Iowa, at least currently. And then Ohio, I consider that a lean Trump, if not likely. Booker could appeal to some degree. I believe it would be a closer margin than it was in 2016, just like it would be with any other Democrat. But I don't believe that it would be close enough to make the state go to the Democrats. And now New Hampshire, I consider that state to be likely. I consider the state to be likely Booker, just because of Trump's, just because of his ability to campaign in the Northeast, and I believe he would have better appeal in the Northeast than Trump would. And for that reason, I make this state likely Booker, and this of course gives him the hypothetical victory in this 2020 election scenario. But we're not done yet. Maine's 2nd district I consider to be a lean in Trump's column, and like I said, this district is kind of hard to call in general for either party. I consider it a lean just because Booker is from the region, and I believe he could compete a bit better, but still, it go to Trump, I think. And then Maine's 2 districts at large, I believe, are likely to go to him. I don't think there's much chance at him losing not those 2 districts, that district, Maine at large, I mean. And then Arizona. I was going to call this state for Trump either way, but I don't know whether to call it a lean or likely. I think that given the shift we're seeing, and given the fact that Booker is a decent candidate, I don't think that Booker's a great candidate. I think that he's a decent candidate at the most. I believe that he's just probably a generic Democrat at this point, but a generic Democrat who I believe could campaign well, if that makes sense. So for that reason, I would rate this state as, I'm going to say likely. I believe that the only reason that this state would be lean or in the Democrats' column is if they're Hispanic or Bernie Sanders type candidates who can drive a grassroots campaign strategy. I know I keep repeating myself, but I'm gonna say lean, just considering the margin that it was with Hillary Clinton, and then considering that'll probably become even a thinner margin. I believe that it'd become lean in Trump's column. And then Florida, I believe, is what would put Booker over the top, with 301 electoral votes. And the reason why I would call that in Booker's column is because I believe that Hispanic turnout. Oh, I forgot to fill this in. I believe that'd be lean in Trump's column, basically for the same reasons that fill in Ohio for Trump's lean in Trump's column. I believe that Florida would go into Booker's column, just because I believe that Hispanic turnout will be at a median, not a high, not a low, but a median, just because Booker can't appeal to minorities in general. but I believe it would be just as high as it should be, and then combined with the gun rights movement, combined with the slight African American turnout, which we'll see in the state in general, I believe that would be a lean to Booker, but that's a very hard call to make. I'm not entirely confident about that. So Booker, I don't believe would be the best candidate for the Democrat. As you can see with this light pale color here, there is a lot of room for Trump to take states like Wisconsin, even Florida, from Booker, which would make Trump the next president if that were the case. And I believe that there are better candidates to nominate than Booker, but I don't believe he's one of the worst. That's what I'll say. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was another suggestion. And for my next video, I want to do like 1 or 2 more presidential election scenarios, and maybe I want to share my thoughts on which ones I think would be the best, which ones I think would be the worst. You guys can say what you think about that, or what you want in the next video in general. So yeah, thanks for watching. See ya.